In the 5th year of being with Luke, he brought home his divorced and pregnant White Moonlight. I quit. Luke, choose one. If you have me, you cannot have her. He chose the White Moonlight, and I became a complete joke. Since that is the case, I do not want the child either. But his eyes turned red, and he knelt by the bed and called me by my nickname for the first time. Lily, let's do well from now on, all right. Ling Yao, Celine got divorced. Bang! The moment I heard this news, I accidentally shattered my glass. Red wine mixed with broken glass splashed all over me. I instinctively looked at Luke. Usually, at a time like this, he would drop whatever he was doing, come check if I was hurt, and then say, "It's okay, I'm here, go rest." But this time, he did not. "Okay, I'll be right there." Luke hung up the phone and left in a hurry without even looking at me. The people in the living room looked at each other in confusion, while I stood in the wreckage, embarrassed to the extreme. The birthday cake on the table was still uncut. I was wearing a diamond crown, yet I looked like a clown at this moment. Except for my best friend May, who looked at me with deep concern, everyone else's eyes showed sympathy, indifference, or even ridicule. Some say that however your boyfriend treats you, that is how his friends will treat you. All these people were Luke's friends, and Luke's feelings for me were not true love. In his friends' eyes, Celine was the real one. Now that Celine was divorced, they were delighted. I, the supporting role, should step aside. Lily, Lily. I snapped out of it and looked at May. She looked worried and asked, "Are you okay?" Glancing around, I realized that Luke's friends had left at some point, and only May and I were left in the huge house. I forced a smile and said, "I'm all right." May hesitated, and I knew what she wanted to say. She was going to comfort me by saying Luke must have had an urgent matter and that I should not think too much. But she probably felt it was too flimsy an excuse, so she could not bring herself to say it. After I sent May off, I waited for Luke all night in the living room, calling him countless times, but he never answered. The cake that had been left overnight tasted sickeningly sweet, but I still forced myself to eat a few bites because it was the birthday cake I had made a wish on. My wish was to be together with Luke for a long, long time. But obviously, that was no longer possible. The next day, Luke brought Celine home. "Lily, Celine is pregnant." He guarded Celine carefully, with endless patience. She had a slightly rounded belly and looked gentle and quiet. When they exchanged a smile, it made me feel like an outsider. I felt a wave of nausea. What does that have to do with me? Celine frowned and cried. "Lily, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you both, but I really have nowhere to go." A flash of pain appeared on Luke's weary face. He protected her behind him and said to me, "Celine got divorced. She has no one in her family. I'm her only friend here, so I have to help her." His face was so expressive. I never knew those cold eyes could hold so many emotions. "Is the child yours?" I sneered. Luke seemed shocked by such a filthy thought, frowning as he said, "What nonsense." Celine also looked shocked and waved her hand. "Lily, you misunderstood." I ignored her and stared straight at Luke. "Aren't you going to explain it to me?" "Explain what?" "Yesterday was my birthday, and you left me hanging all night for someone who has nothing to do with you." I held back the anger in my heart and looked at him. "Don't you need to explain yourself? Celine is not someone unrelated." Luke stared at me and said. That was his explanation. Celine was not just anyone. She was the White Moonlight he loved but could not have. Ling Er. I got together with Luke back in college. I was the one who pursued him. We first met on the bus returning to campus. Luke sat in front of me, wearing headphones and looking out the window. The smooth contour of his profile was bathed in sunlight, like a shining work of art. After getting off the bus, I realized Luke and I went to the same school. Right when he was about to enter the dorm building, I called out to him, "Classmate, can I have your contact information?" That was my first time actively chasing a boy. Later, I learned Luke was the heartthrob of his department. Handsome face, tall with long legs, excellent grades. He always received all kinds of scholarships and was also the captain of the school basketball team, with a large crowd of admirers. As the saying goes, those who dare to act bravely get love first. I brought him breakfast for his early AA classes, brought him water and clothes when he played basketball in the scorching sun, and gave him flowers and gifts on holidays. Just like that, 2 months later, I got what I wanted and we were together. When we were dating, Luke was still very aloof. Sometimes I would talk for 10 minutes, and he would end it with just one but he never showed bad emotions and always gave in to me. So I always thought Luke was willing to be with me because he liked me, until we attended a wedding after graduation. Which do you think would be better for our own wedding in the future, a Chinese ceremony or a Western one? Luke did not answer. He just stood there in a daze, staring at the person on the stage for a long time without moving. Following his gaze, I finally noticed the bride on stage. That night, Luke drank until he was completely drunk. I had never seen him like that. He threw up everywhere and kept murmuring, "Celine, Celine. My nickname is Lily, and Luke has only ever called me Lily by my full name. It hurts. I quickly asked, where does it hurt? Luke touched his chest and looked at me with wounded eyes. Right here. It hurts. It was then I learned Celine was Luke's White Moonlight. I finally understood why his friends gave me those strange looks at the wedding. I was the one everyone knew he was settling for. But I did not break up with Luke. There is a saying, the existence of a white moonlight cannot be replaced, not even by the person herself. I believe it, so I do not compare myself to her. I do not care about winning or losing. I only want a real, tangible love, even if it is just a fraction of a whole. After that night, I pretended I had not discovered anything and continued acting like a couple in a passionate relationship with Luke. We graduated together, worked hard together, and finally had a home of our own in this city. But the naive girl who once told May, I'm just avoiding the sharp edge, also changed. I could never again feel confident saying that. In the years I have been with Luke, whenever Celine had any trouble, a simple phone call or a gentle look could pull my boyfriend away from me. She was like a tiny fish bone lodged in my love. It did not kill me, but it hurt terribly. And now, she got divorced. She turned from a small fish bone that could be swallowed whole into a fuse I could no longer ignore. Sure enough, the destructive power of a white moonlight is famous for a reason. The moment she got divorced, my 5-year relationship with Luke was shattered, leaving us in chaos and ruin. 03. I packed my things and moved out. That home was something I had once spent time decorating with care, our little nest. But now Luke wanted his white moonlight to move in. I did go back once in the meantime, and the moment I walked in, I saw Luke feeding Celine some medicine. Celine noticed me first. She sat up from the sofa and said, Lily, you're back. Only then did Luke realize I was there. He placed the bowl of medicine aside without any guilt, then looked at me. Where have you been? I ignored him and walked straight to the master bedroom. The style of the room had changed dramatically. The bed was covered in a soft shade of green, and the balcony was filled with all kinds of green potted plants. I remembered how, back then, when I begged to plant flowers, Luke never agreed, yet it only took a few days for everything to change. My heart felt bitter. Indeed, whether there is love or not can be seen with just one glance. Celine walked in carefully, still supporting her waist. Lily, I'm really sorry for disturbing you both. Luke draped a coat over her shoulders. Don't say things like you're an outsider. Then he turned and said to me, our room is in the other bedroom. I bypassed them and went to the next room. I heard Luke softly say to Celine, you go rest first. I'll call you when the food is done. In the 5 years I had been with Luke, he never cooked for me, but it turned out he knew how to cook. Hey. I tugged at the corner of my mouth and started looking for my documents. Luke walked in. Lily, where have you been these past few days? I left space for you too. I found what I needed and walked out without stopping. When I passed by Luke, he suddenly grabbed my arm. His impatient eyes glared at me, and he spoke in a low voice. What exactly are you making a fuss about? Let go of me. I struggled and shouted loudly. I could not help but feel disgusted when I thought of his arms holding Celine and feeding her medicine, how the warmth from his skin had also touched her. The more I struggled, the harder he held me. His strong hand clamped my arm like an iron claw, hurting me so badly that tears welled up in my eyes. I started kicking his calf frantically. Luke took a sharp breath of pain but still did not let me go. He forced my hands behind my back and pressed his burning kiss to my cheek, slowly moving to my lips. Luke closed his eyes, wrapped his arm around my waist, and his soft tongue broke through my clenched teeth. I bit down hard and shoved him away. What's the matter? Luke's dark eyes fixed on me, his voice hoarse and low. His hands moved to pull me into his arms again. Recalling how he always showed weakness in front of me before, I hesitated. So what if there is a white moonlight? I have been with him for 5 years. Right then, a question came to mind, which is harder to accept, emotional betrayal or physical betrayal? After 5 years of giving him everything, I choose the first. I softened my tone. Tell Celine to move out. We can rent her a place. She cannot be alone. Don't be so petty, okay? The desire in Luke's eyes was replaced by frustration. Luke. Celine called him again. Luke, choose one. If you have me, you cannot have her. I threw down the ultimatum, nervous yet expectant, watching his reaction. Lily, please don't force him. Celine stood on the side with tearful eyes. Do you also call me Lily? I could no longer hold back and roared at her. I had never really taken this white moonlight seriously before. Because she was married, and with Luke's personality, he would never do something like having an affair. So I had been full of hope for him, hoping to marry him one day. But fate did not go my way. Celine got divorced, and Luke never forgot her. It has nothing to do with her. Take it out on me if you're angry. Once again, he stood in front of her. I'll ask you one last time. Who do you choose? I demanded harshly. Celine. He answered without hesitation. Slap. I gave him a slap, so hard my hand went numb. There were countless moments in those 5 years when I thought Luke had fallen in love with me. But with one word, Celine, he yanked me out of that dream. I was furious that he toyed with my feelings, and I was also heartbroken that my love went nowhere. Pride and self-respect made me turn around and leave decisively, but disobedient tears still rolled down my cheeks. I laughed at myself while crying, admitting complete defeat. 04. Life is always more melodramatic than a TV show at that time. I found out I was pregnant. Of all times, it just had to be now. It could have come in the year we bought a house, the year we met each other's parents. This child had so many better moments to arrive, yet it chose right after Luke and I broke up. Faced with its poor timing, I still felt a trace of secret joy behind my confusion. Yes, joy. No matter how much I deny it, I cannot stop loving Luke. Over the long course of our relationship, I have grown endlessly close to him and dependent on him. Putting aside the existence of the White Moonlight, all our shared experiences of happiness and sorrow were not fake. So, after hesitating, I decided to call Luke. As the father, he ought to know. Most importantly, he really liked children. When we used to talk about this topic, Luke would unconsciously smile and say, it would be best to have a daughter. I would pick the stars from the sky for her. He never said such things to me, so I would even get jealous of that daughter. But now, as I touched my still flat belly, I felt that even picking stars from the sky would not be enough for her. I tried to calm my excitement and dialed his number, forcing a cool tone. Luke, I'm pregnant. He sounded very tired and sighed. Stop fooling around. Celine is really not doing well lately. Celine. He only cared about Celine. His cold response extinguished my joy in an instant. I said icily, you think I'm just messing around? We have always taken precautions. How could you possibly be pregnant? Luke raised his voice, as if he could not stand it anymore. Now it was my turn to be silent. He did not even remember what he had done. It was clearly that night he had a little to drink, held me, and said, let's have a baby. Have a little one who looks like you, and then let's get married. That was the only time we did not take any precautions. The cold wind blew past, and every gap between my teeth felt chilled. I held myself together and threatened, do you want this child or not? If you don't, then I don't want it. Before I could finish, Luke hung up. Looking at my own pale face reflected in the phone screen, I felt a deep chill all over my body. Luke had never lost his temper with me before, and the few harsh things he had said were all for Celine's sake. The last time, I slapped him. And now, Luke, you are the one who said so. I listened to my own rapid heartbeat and felt a calmness I had never felt before. If Luke would not have it, then I could not keep the child either. I booked the soonest date for a procedure to end the pregnancy. May came to the hospital with me. Have you thought it through? Expressionless, I said, May, I can't let my child be inferior to Celine even before it's born. She sighed and did not try to persuade me further. A few hours later, I came out of the operating room. It felt like I had woken from a dream. My body felt so light. Then the anesthesia wore off, and pain began in my lower abdomen. May steadied me. I clutched my stomach, feeling dazed. May, it's gone. Am I too cruel? May paused, then hugged me. He's the cruel one, Luke. He betrayed a true heart, and he deserves to swallow 1,000 needles. I burst into tears at once. I remembered when I was little, if I spent a long time on a math problem but only got the wrong answer, I felt like the sky was falling. And now, I used 5 years of youth and filled it with heartfelt devotion, only to end up with nothing. This was the mistake in my life's test, in the test of love. I had no chance to correct it, and punishment for the wrong answer was bound to come. But the most pitiful one was still this child. I failed it. We were leaving the hospital when we ran into Luke, who was helping Celine out of the car. Celine noticed us first. Lily, why are you here? Luke looked at me in confusion. My eyes were full of indifference. He was the wrong condition in the math problem, and now I hated him more than ever. May was about to rush up and demand an explanation, but I stopped her. May, I'm so tired. She held back, glared at them, and continued supporting me as we walked away. My face was pale, my steps unsteady, and I kept holding my stomach. Luke stared at me without blinking. What's wrong with you? He asked. Stop pretending. May snapped at him. That was exactly what I wanted to say. Why is he pretending he does not know anything? As you wished. I spoke weakly. Oddly enough, I saw a hint of unease on Luke's face. In the past, no matter if I was happy or upset, he always stayed calm, never taking it to heart. So why was he so scared at just a few words now? But it had nothing to do with me anymore. Now, not only does Celine stand between us, but also a lost life. There will never be any future for us again. We passed each other as we walked away, and the old feelings no longer surged in my heart. Just before getting in the car, I heard Luke call out once, Lily. Then I heard Celine's surprised voice, Luke. I did not turn back to look. The scenery outside the window fell behind in reverse, just like my past. Everything had become the past tense. 05. I took my annual leave and stayed at May's home for a while. Before going to work, she prepared breakfast and lunch for me, telling me to heat them up before eating. Seeing her check online recipes to awkwardly simmer chicken soup made my eyes fill with tears for some reason. Oh dear, why are you crying? They say you need to take good care of yourself even after a miscarriage. If you cry too much and leave a problem in your body, what will you do? May said as she packed her bag. I wiped my tears and laughed. You sound just like my mom. That's a good thing. You be the daughter, I'll be the mom, and we'll never worry about people pushing us to marry and have kids. All right, I won't talk anymore. I'm going to be late for work. Make sure to heat up the soup before drinking. Okay. The door closed with a click. My smile faded the moment it shut. I stared at the empty room, lost in thought. After a while, I wandered toward the window, following the sunlight. The air felt cold, and suddenly I heard a few clear bird chirps. I snapped out of my daze and saw a figure downstairs. It was Luke. On my birthday night, I called him all night. Last night, he did the same to my phone. Ding. May sent a message. Lily, Luke has been calling me asking about you. He's downstairs now. Do you want to talk to him? Don't be afraid. If there's a problem, call me. I'm here. Okay. I sent this to May. Come up. I sent this to Luke. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Luke's eyes were bloodshot. The first thing he said when he saw me was, "Where's the child?" He glanced at my belly without thinking, then stared at me, as if he wouldn't stop until he got an answer. I let out a cold laugh and spoke softly. You really do forget important things. Don't you remember what you said? Lily. Luke bent down and cupped my face. His fingers gently caressed the corners of my eyes, coaxing me in a low voice. Speak to me nicely. Tell me, where is our baby? I looked up into his uneasy gaze for a few seconds, then couldn't help laughing out loud. He was afraid. He could actually be afraid. When Luke saw me laugh, it was as if he was finally relieved. Then he couldn't stop himself from laughing too. His usually cold face became gentle. I had never seen him smile so genuinely before. His face was full of excitement as he tried to pull me into his arms. But I said calmly, "It's gone." Luke's movement froze in place. He slowly straightened up, frowned, and shook his head. Lily, don't say such silly things. I stared at him silently. Seeing that, Luke staggered back a few steps. I looked coldly at his pale lips, watching him open his mouth several times without speaking. A wave of satisfaction came over me. But it wasn't enough. His sadness wasn't even a tenth of mine. I twisted my face and shouted sharply, "You killed her. You didn't believe she existed. You didn't want her because you like Celine. Celine's child is more precious than her." After hearing the first part, Luke's face turned paler and paler. His eyes showed pain and guilt. But once I mentioned Celine, he started to defend himself. "I don't like her." "Don't like her?" I murmured, laughing. "Right, you don't like her, you love her. She's the white moonlight and the red mark in your heart. For her, you didn't want me or the baby. Then why did you even get together with me in the first place?" All the emotions I had held back for years burst out at once. I admit I was cheap. I was the one who liked you first. But I wasn't a third party. If you didn't like me, you should have told me. Tell me. With those words of regret shouted out, my tears overflowed. I hated that time couldn't reverse, hated that this relationship couldn't be erased like a pencil mark. I hated Luke, hated that he wasn't the right one. But I hated myself more, hated myself for never doing the problem correctly. Last night, I had a long nightmare. I dreamed of a pool of blood growing a face, talking in a baby voice. "Mommy, why didn't you want me?" I dreamed that its hand turned into a giant claw, stabbing through my belly from the cervix. I also dreamed the operating room light became the sun, turning the blood beneath me black under its heat. Following the trail of dried blood, I saw a chubby white baby smiling at me, only for it to be torn to pieces in the next second, howling in agony. When I woke up, I found my pillow soaked with tears. Luke knew nothing of this because he was with pregnant Celine. I collapsed to the ground, crying so hard I nearly fainted. Luke squatted down and held me, his voice trembling. "Lily." This was the first time he intimately called me by my nickname, but I didn't feel happy. Within his warm embrace, I lifted my head and grabbed his arm, biting down hard. Soft flesh, solid bone. I used all my strength to bite as if I wanted to break him into pieces. Luke left his arm there, not dodging or resisting, until I tasted blood. My teeth left a deep mark that reached the bone. He endured the pain and pulled me back into his arms. "Lily, I'm sorry." I closed my eyes in exhaustion. I had no energy left to speak through my sobs. I wanted to say, "It's useless, Luke. We're done." 06. My mind was starved of oxygen, lost in grief. I didn't even realize when Luke carried me back into the house. By the time he brought over a bowl of chicken soup to the bed, I had calmed down. Here, drink something warm first to settle your stomach. I stared blankly at his calm face, really seeing how rational a man could be. He showed not even a bit of extra sadness for a lost life. That inevitably made me think of my father, who was endlessly kind to outsiders but always cold to his own family. Meanwhile, my tear-stained face right now didn't it make me the same as my mother? I raised my hand and knocked the hot soup right out of Luke's grip, drenching him. He didn't look embarrassed at all, just silently cleaned up. In a stuffy voice, I asked with a cold glare, "You're not the least bit sad?" He paused for a second, then said, "Lily, there will be more children in the future. We're still young." Bastard! Fury overwhelmed me. I kicked Luke, who was crouching on the floor, sending him sprawling. The broken shards cut his palms, but he didn't make a sound. He just looked at me and said, "Lily, you can hit me and scold me. Just don't get upset. Don't hurt your body." He wiped his hands on his shirt and held my calf, looking up at me. "Also, don't leave me." Luke dropped all his pride and acted wrong and pitiful, making me look like a bad person. I clenched my teeth and swung my arm, slapping him so hard that his head whipped to the side. It took a while for him to look back at me. A red imprint slowly appeared on his face, but he just smiled faintly. "Lily, as long as you feel better." Slap. Before he could finish, I gave him another slap. This time, before Luke could fully turn his face back, I lifted my foot and kicked him. Sadly, he was too solid, and even with all my strength in my leg, I couldn't budge him an inch. I only ended up panting from exhaustion. Luke grabbed my still raised leg, wrapped his hot palm around my foot, and said quietly, "Why aren't you wearing socks? Your feet are so cold." I shook his hand off. A bit of blood from his palm stained my white instep. I stared at that blood stain, trying to catch my breath. "Don't you think you are humiliating yourself by acting like this?" Luke shook his head. "How could it be humiliation? You're not someone else. What about Celine? Do you act this way with her too?" Just thinking about it made me sick. Luke's expression froze. "I can explain that to you." Seeing that I remained silent, he hurriedly said, "I did like her before, but that was in high school. We were too young. Celine is beautiful but didn't do well in school. When she didn't get into college, I gave up enlisting in the army. I just wanted to graduate early so I could marry her. But she had little sense of security about long-distance relationships. She said she couldn't wait." He frowned remembering their past. "I was sad for a long time after we broke up, until I met you," Luke said, looking at me. "Then I realized how childish I used to be. Lily, teenage feelings aren't worth counting on." So, she wasn't a white moonlight he couldn't have, she was a first love he couldn't forget. What about now? Luke looked at me with steady eyes. "There is no possibility with her anymore. I just want her to live well." Then he leaned over and held my hand. "Come home with me, all right? Your body is weak and you need good rest. Let me take care of you." "What about her?" Luke paused for a second before he answered. "Lin Lang took her away." Lin Lang was Celine's rich ex-husband. It looked like they might get back together. I let out a small laugh. "So we're at the part where the man regrets and tries to chase me. Disgusting. Men are all the same. Why do they only treasure something after they hurt it? Late regret is cheaper than grass." I slowly withdrew my hand as Luke gave me a pleading look. His eyes turned red immediately, and he knelt down in front of me in a low voice. "Lily, I was wrong. Please give me a chance to make it up to you. Let's live well from now on, okay?" I pulled my hand away and shook my head calmly. "There is no from now on, Luke. Someone who trampled my true heart deserves to pay. And I don't want everything to go as he wishes." 07. After my annual leave, I moved to an old neighborhood near my company. May took a day off to help me. "You tell me, why not just stay at my place? Here, you have to climb the stairs." She looked around, panting. I pressed my lips together. "I don't want to see him again. Also, this place is closer to my company and feels more alive." After the last time I saw Luke, I completely cut ties with him. What I didn't expect was that he learned how to pester me without shame. That once steady and proud Luke was now humble and pleading. Even May seemed moved by it. She hesitated and asked, "Lily, what are you planning to do with your future?" I found her hesitation strange. "May, what do you want to say?" May looked at me seriously. "Since ancient times, it's hard to have the best of both worlds. We can't guarantee you'll meet someone better than Luke in the future, right?" It was like a needle pricked my brain. Standing in that small, run-down rental room, I suddenly felt how narrow life could be. May looked at me with a mix of heartbreak and resignation about reality. She seemed reluctant to continue but still poured out her thoughts, and her voice felt like it came from all around me. "Lily, you two spent your best years together. You bought a home in this big city and put down roots. The only thing left was to get married, and your life would have been perfect. Now you want to start over just because of a first love. A man's youth is not the same as a woman's." After the breakup, Luke is a successful golden bachelor with a house and car, but Lily, you're going to have a hard time. Your career hasn't really taken off yet, and you basically wasted these 5 years. I'm worried you'll be hurt in both body and heart, then need 10,000 times the effort to build your finances. I'm also afraid that after all your struggles, you might meet someone worse than Luke. My mind went blank, and I felt like I was back in time 10 years ago. I remember telling May, when I get rich, I'll definitely take care of you. But 10 years later, I still have nothing, poor and timid. Seeing my sorry state, May looked anxious. Lily, every man has an unforgettable first love, and anyone who takes it too seriously ends up losing. I'm saying all this because I want someone to treat you well. Luke is that person. He feels guilty now and will treat you 10,000 times better than before. Her words hit me so hard I felt hollow. Deep inside, I already knew this situation. After studying hard for so many years, I graduated only to discover how hard it is to earn money in modern society. Luke, who studied engineering, had a far easier path to success than I, who studied the humanities. During our time together, he paid for most of our expenses, not to mention the house and car, all paid from his pocket. Yes, materially, I cannot stand tall against Luke's pursuit now. I'm an ordinary person, poor and unremarkable. Because I realize this, I feel so much pain. I'm not willing to accept this. I'm really not. In love, clearly Luke was the one who was wrong, yet I seem to be the lower one. May, if I just forgive him, I'll be resentful my whole life, I said, watching specks of dust dance in the glow of the setting sun. Tears welled up in the corners of my eyes again. May hugged me tightly. I understand, I do understand. How could I not? But as adults, the first thing we learned is to weigh the pros and cons, right? I didn't answer. I only felt sorrow. Love should not be about weighing advantages, but it's so hard not to be ordinary. We stood silently, holding each other as the sun went down and night fell. After a while, she spoke in a low voice, I'm getting engaged. I looked at May in surprise. Where? Because she'd been in a long-distance relationship with Liu Chunxian. May smiled quietly, where he lives. I paused. When are you getting married? At the end of this year. So we won't see each other much in the future? I don't want to lie. Lily, the person who will stay with us the longest in our lives is ourselves. Yes. There is no feast that never ends. Everyone has their own path to walk. As for me, Lily, 27 years old, where is my path? 08. I didn't expect the answer to come so quickly. When I felt lost about my unchanging job, my boss, MS. Lin, called me into her office. The group is setting up a branch in the south. We need some people from headquarters to transfer there. What do you think? MS. Lin is my direct supervisor, a strong and independent 40-year-old woman who never married or had kids. MS. Lin, don't rush to say no. The people who transfer there will find it hard at first, but the positions and salaries will be better. The group wants to nurture them as key talents, and they'll become the veterans of the new branch. You're at the right age to fight for your future. Don't you want to give it a shot? MS. Lin, I need time to think. Can I give you an answer in a day? My head was spinning. She smiled. Of course, but that's not the main point. The main point is, I plan to recommend you as a manager. I panicked and waved my hands without thinking. MS. Lin, I can't do it. Don't set limits for yourself before you begin. Saying you can't do it means you think I don't have good judgment. Do you think I have bad judgment? She teased me with a big smile. Of course not. I've always admired you, MS. Lin. I said quietly, I'm just scared I'm not capable. In my eyes, you've always been someone who takes work very seriously. I still remember when you first started, you cried after making a mistake and apologized to me. You never repeated it again. Actually, I'm a perfectionist like you, but the difference is you don't have ambition for career and money. You focus too much on feelings. MS. Lin leaned forward and asked me, but what have you gained from those feelings? It was like a blocked vein had suddenly cleared. All my pain and confusion had a source. Yes, what feelings did I gain? My parents divorced when I was young. They both quickly formed new families. I was left to grow up silently and alone, always craving love. I lacked love. I wanted that close bond of only two people, but my ties to my parents were thin, my romantic love was fragile, and my best friend had her own shore to land on. I had almost nothing. I avoided MS. Lin's all-seeing gaze, but I still forced myself to ask the question in my heart. MS. Lin, what did you get? She leaned back in her chair and smiled gracefully. I have my financial freedom that will never betray me, a world that treats everyone fairly, and a forever young and happy mindset. Her confident glow mesmerized me. No one ever envied me for having a young, handsome, successful boyfriend, but so many people envied MS. Lin for her unstoppable career, her calm determination, and her elegant, abundant life. I used to envy her too. But why can't I do the same? Other people's achievements are made step by step. I can work, I have the ability, and now I have a chance. Why can't I? Hot blood surged in me, and I blurted, I'll go. M.S. Lin finally smiled. Now that's more like it. After work, the busy central business district was full of people coming and going. In the crowd, I saw Luke right away. He wore a well-fitted navy blue suit, tall and upright among the masses, appearing proud and distant. Someone who didn't know better would think he was a young master or a CEO who inherited his family business. But in reality, Luke was just a clever person from an ordinary family. He had all the qualities to succeed and became a rising star in technology from nothing. I looked at him from afar, feeling as if a lifetime had passed since we last spoke. It turned out that when I let go of love, the rest of the world looked so clear. I finally had a goal to chase. Life was no longer a track, but a vast field. And Luke was no longer the heartbreaking wrong answer. He was a passerby, a piece of scenery, and a destination I never wanted to reach again. 09. For the first time in a while, I did not avoid Luke but walked straight toward him. He seemed stunned for a moment, then came forward. He spoke with obvious joy and a hint of flattery. Lily, you must be tired from work today. Let me take you to dinner, okay? All right. I agreed unexpectedly. Luke paused for a few seconds before reacting. Then he quickly took my bag from my shoulder. Okay. I didn't speak much after getting in the car. He kept trying to find a topic. My mom's been calling me about you, saying she misses you. How about we visit them sometime? He drove, but his eyes kept sneaking glances at my face. I snapped at him, keep your eyes on the road. That finally shut him up. Luke's parents are really nice. His mom loves me very much, always saying she once hoped for a daughter but ended up with 2 sons. Every time I visited, they treated me like royalty. Luke once joked, anyone would think the president was coming. I always envied how warm his family was. His older brother was quiet but dependable, his younger brother was mischievous but brought everyone joy, and most importantly, his parents were harmonious. It was the family I always wanted but never had. Sometimes I even wished we could swap parents, mine for his. But it wasn't the same. Back in high school, when Luke and Celine dated, they never stopped it. So why would they like me more than they love their son? Hello, all your dishes are served. Enjoy. Okay, thank you. I came back to reality and found Luke looking at me with concern. What's wrong? Nothing. I shook my head and said what I had come to say. I have something to tell you. Luke lowered his gaze, then looked up with a smile that was clearly forced. Okay, go ahead. I turned my head, looking at the scenery outside the window, and spoke slowly. After I lost the child, I really hated you. I regretted everything. I felt it was your fault, but actually, I share some blame too. Lily. I looked at him. I was wrong because I treated love as too important and treated life too lightly. I used her life to gamble for your love. I love you, Luke said firmly, with deep emotion. It's not your fault. It was my irresponsibility, my failure to give you enough trust and security. I shook my head slightly. It's all in the past. It doesn't matter now. What matters is we must move forward. I'm leaving North City. Luke's face showed obvious panic. His eyes filled with worry. Then what about me? Luke, let's part on good terms. Talk it over with your parents. I won't be going to see them. I swore there was no hatred or intention of revenge in my words, just complete relief. But his eyes turned red in an instant. Lily, you don't love me anymore? My mind wandered. He really does sound better calling me Lily by my full name. He asked again, and I finally answered, loving a person costs energy. I'm exhausted. That's okay. I'll love you. You don't have to do anything. I forced a laugh. Isn't it a little late for that? I'm sorry. Luke rarely apologized before because he rarely made mistakes, but these days he apologized every day. He knew he was wrong. But so what? The Luke who loves me most can't meet the Lily who loves him most. We just aren't meant to be. 10. I thought that would be the last time I saw him. But on my last night in this city, a drunk Luke knocked on my door, supported by someone else. Sorry to bother you. He kept insisting he had to find you, and we couldn't stop him. Lin Yushin lay Luke, who reeked of alcohol, on my couch and apologized. I frowned. Luke had never acted drunk like this before. What was going on? Lily, I want Lily. His face was bright red, and he kept mumbling. What is he calling? Lin Yushin looked a bit embarrassed. Isn't he calling for you? I snorted softly. He never called me such a clingy name before. I squatted down and patted Luke's burning cheeks. Luke. No response. You bastard. My face turned cold with impatience for the first time. Luke, don't make me look down on you. If he had stayed proud and never pestered me, I would at least have had some respect for him. But instead, he sank into the sad, self-torturing act. Lin Yushin seemed unhappy with my words. Lily, enough is enough. Hasn't Luke done enough for you? Oh. What has he done for me? I was genuinely curious about how his friends viewed our relationship. He worked like crazy after graduation to marry you, didn't he? When he first started the company, no matter how late he worked, he would go home for you because he said you'd be scared alone. Ever since he started dating you, he's brought you to every one of our gatherings. He spent all his non-working time with you. He bought a house and a car just for you. What more do you want? I fell silent, a huge sense of helplessness washing over me. So what about Celine, then? Even Luke had apologized to me for that. Yet outsiders thought I was ungrateful. Why should I accept this cheap, belated affection? He hurt me for his first love, the White Moonlight. That's a fact. He crossed the line emotionally, and that's also a fact. Why should he deserve forgiveness? Lin Yushin couldn't respond. Lily. Looking at Luke lying on the couch, he sighed and said to me, if you're too clear-headed, you'll end up with nothing. A breeze blew in through the window, rustling the curtains. I felt like I was back on that afternoon solving math questions. I said stubbornly, why can't I be clear? Why? Lin Yushin paused, then left without another word. He didn't even care about the drunk Luke. I sighed heavily and used a damp towel to wipe Luke's face. Under the harsh light, his unfocused eyes welled with tears. He looked at me and murmured, Lily. I froze for a second, my stiff lips curling into a smirk. Who exactly are you calling? He started to sob softly. I was too stunned to move, just watched in a daze as the tears fell 1 drop, 2 drops. Luke's hoarse voice trembled with pain. Our baby, my baby with Lily. Lily Bao. A suffocating heartbreak overcame me. I covered my mouth, crying silently. But the cries only got louder. They weren't mine, they were Luke's. He covered his eyes and shook, crying with desperate helplessness. The child I aborted, he had given her a name, Lily Bao. So it wasn't just me who felt the pain. 11. I stayed by Luke's side all night. But I didn't wait for him to wake. I got on a plane heading south. Before that, I said goodbye to May, had a farewell meal with my coworkers, but didn't even say farewell to Luke. Because I was afraid if I saw him, I'd feel regret. He was such a good man. Too bad he did something wrong. That kind of regret feels like when I found out a favorite celebrity had solicited prostitutes. People have thousands of sides. Good and bad both belong to them. But how could I trust him again? I couldn't. The only thing I could rely on was my work. After I arrived at the new branch, I threw myself entirely into my job, hiring new members, training employees, leading the team to reach our goals. Over and over, I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I climbed upward and finally became someone the younger girls admired. Manager Lily. Looking at the young and innocent intern in front of me, I felt a sense of confusion, as if I were seeing my old self. Sis Lily. Sis Lily. Then what happened? Qin Miao waved her hand in front of my face. I came back to reality and smiled faintly. What else could happen? Nothing more. Ah. She pouted. How did it end like that? I thought you guys would get back together. I didn't realize my gaze was so tolerant. I said with amusement, after everything, how could we get back together? All right, I'm not here just to tell you stories. I cut off her regretful sighs. Aren't you going back to the main office, which means going home? Why are you hesitating? Qin Miao originally came from the north, but studied in the south and stayed here because she had a boyfriend. Their story wasn't as dramatic, but they had broken up and reunited many times. I just used myself as an example to persuade her. But Qin Miao still insisted on staying with her boyfriend. Sis Lily, love and career don't always have to be either or. Maybe Cheng Xian is part of my future. Didn't you work your way up in this southern city? I was at a loss for words. She suddenly asked with curiosity, did your ex get married? Did Luke get married? I don't know. After that night, I never saw him again, and I never followed any news about him. But when I turned 30, I met him once more. In that cold northern place, I ran into him leaving his room after I finished a meeting and was returning to my hotel. Sorry, it's Oka. Why? I was lowering my head, he was raising his. We collided, and that moment froze. He gazed at me in surprise, and I smiled. Long time no see. Long time no see. In the warm, quiet lobby, I stirred my coffee and set my spoon down. Then I looked at the man across from me. Have things been okay for you lately? Luke responded slowly. He seemed to have some fine lines at the corners of his eyes, looking more mature. Everything's fine. How about you? I shrugged a little. About the same. We sat quietly for a few seconds. I was about to stand up and leave when he spoke again. I've always wanted to ask, why did you like me back then? I was surprised and stared at him for a while before laughing. Seriously, Luke, after all these years. He still wore that persistent look, so I stopped laughing. Slowly, I recalled the past. Why did I like Luke? First reason, he was good looking. Second reason, he was a good person. On that bus, I noticed him before he even got on. There were many older people in line. Some had trouble walking, some carried heavy bags of groceries. He was at the end of the line, helping them board. Someone said to him, "Young man, thank you so much." I heard a warm, clear voice, "Sir, don't mention it." So I observed him all the way, and I gathered my courage to ask for his contact information, even praising him, "You're really good looking." In the end, Luke just said, "Thank you." And from that moment, my heart was captured. I never got to tell him this because he never cared. Yet here we were, he was 32 now. He seemed lost in those past memories again. I snapped out of it and warned him with my eyes, "Luke, don't make the same mistakes again. Don't let me become your white moonlight. Don't let me lose to the old Lily from the past. Don't let me resent how time passes. Because every minute, every second, I'm still me, and I don't regret the past." Luke forced out a reply, "I definitely won't." "That's good." I nodded, finally stood up, and left without looking at his expression. A single tear dripped into the dark coffee. Luke lowered his head, covering his eyes. He was like a statue, silent for a long, long time. A person only learns to cherish once they lose. "Hello, classmate, can I have your contact info?" "Sure. You're so good looking." Thump, thump, thump. "Thank you." Thump, thump, thump. Sha. Luke's side story. I always thought my teenage years were the most glorious time of my life. Back then, I didn't realize that society demanded men to have a house, a car, and a career. I only knew that good grades were my pride, and my looks and height were my calling card. In class, I was the class monitor and had that small measure of authority. The most admired, prettiest girl adored me. Everything went smoothly for me, until after the college entrance exam, when I stepped into the real world. My girlfriend left me because of my weak family background and uncertain future. She matured earlier than I did and learned society's hidden rules too soon. I was not only hurt emotionally, but my whole outlook on life was shaken. A man must have either power or money. That was the success standard I realized. From then on, I worked toward that goal, and Lily was the best gift God gave me on that journey. It was a pity that I realized it too late. In the days after losing her, I kept reviewing our relationship. When did I start liking her? It turned out it was from the beginning. From the moment she plucked up the courage to stop me, from the moment she praised me without hesitation, from the moment I saw that bright and enthusiastic look in her eyes. The out-of-control heartbeat had already warned me, but at the time, I thought it was her heartbeat being too nervous. How laughable. I assumed Lily was the realistic choice. So I covered up my failure with Celine by dressing her in White Moonlight's veil. Only when Celine told Lin Lang, "If you weren't a rich heir, who would bother with you?" did I finally realize the truth. I wasn't a rich heir, but Lily stayed with me for so many years. She chased me like I was a girl, bringing me breakfast, flowers, and gifts. What did Lin Yushin say about her back then? He said this girl was silly for chasing a guy without using push and pull tactics. I can't remember if I smiled at the time. I only remember thinking that blue roses were the most beautiful flowers in the world, and Lily was the cutest girl in the world. It must have been in that instant the idea that I can't let anyone else notice her made me agree to her message without hesitation. Okay. 1 second, she was complaining about how expensive flowers at the school gate were. The next, she asked, "Luke, be my boyfriend, all right?" Only now do I see clearly that I never intended to say no to her. How could I bear to refuse? She was a sprout breaking through poor soil. I just wanted to water her so she could bloom into a bright flower. But back then, I didn't even understand my own heart. No wonder she finally gave up on me. I deserved to lose the two most important people in my life. One was Lily, whom I was used to taking care of, and one was Lily Bao, always on my mind. When I was 32, she told me not to make her my white moonlight. I understood. How could there be another Lily? I couldn't keep her, and I couldn't forget her. All I can do is give her everything I achieved through hard work, the house, the car, the stocks, even my boyhood dreams, all of it. But she didn't want any of it. She said, "We have always been equals, except in love I fell behind. And now, I can buy anything money can buy with my own earnings." I knew she had always been a determined person. She just relaxed completely when she was with me, so she wanted nothing. I was happy she grew so strong. But even if she didn't want it, I couldn't not give it. The house and car were in her name already. She refused them, so I converted their value into shares and gifted them to her. In a blink, Lily became the biggest shareholder in the company MS. Lily, how wonderful. She became greater than I am. And me. I remain someone who can't let go, because of a love I cannot forget.